The courtroom doors creaked open as an elderly man was led inside, his hands shackled, his eyes cast downward. His face, lined with the weight of years and hardship, held no defiance, only quiet resignation. His frail body was swallowed by an oversized, worn-out military jacket, hanging like the shadow of a past long gone. "State your name," the clerk asked. The man raised his head slightly, voice trembling. "Mason Quinn, Sergeant, United States Marine Corps." No one expected what was about to happen next. A hush fell over the courtroom. As Judge Olivia Parker flipped through the file, her fingers halted abruptly. Her expression shifted, her face paling as recognition sank in. That name, she had read it before, long ago, in a letter from her brother, written during wartime. Mason Quinn. The man who had dragged her brother from death's door in a firefight near Fallujah. And now, that same man sat before her. Forgotten by time and country. Mason, now 69, took his seat at the defendant's table. His posture was slouched. The proud bearing of a Marine reduced to the quiet endurance of an old soldier who'd lost almost everything. Time had been unkind. The medals and honors that once adorned him were replaced by a charity-issued coat, and his only remaining asset was his silence. The bailiff called out, "Case 47B, City of Brookside versus Mason Quinn." The list of charges was unremarkable. Trespassing, creating a disturbance, resisting arrest. With difficulty, Mason stood. Each step toward the bench was a slow battle, his joints stiff from age and pain. His movement marked by old injuries from wars most had long stopped remembering. Vietnam, then Iraq. He bore the invisible scars just as deeply as the physical ones. The prosecutor, young and crisp in both dress and delivery, rose. The defendant was found behind the Jefferson Street calf. He began. "He's been warned before. The cafe owner has issued multiple complaints this month." He omitted key truths. Mason had never begged. He never hassled anyone. He simply sought a little warmth camped by the kitchen vent during freezing nights. Sometimes, the cook would hand him a leftover sandwich. No questions asked. Officer Reynolds took the stand. Recounting the night's arrest, "I located Mr. Quinn behind the cafe at 11:45 p.m. He refused to leave when asked." In reality, Mason had just asked for a few more minutes to finish what little food he had. "This marks his third citation this year," the prosecutor added. "The city recommends mandatory community service and a ban from the downtown district for 30 days. But that would be a sentence far beyond paper. It would mean no access to the one shelter that offered him a bed. No hot meals from the nearby church. It would mean surviving cold nights in alleys alone." Judge Parker addressed him directly. "Mr. Quinn, do you have an attorney?" He shook his head. "Mine's been called to another case," he murmured. "Do you wish to speak on your own behalf?" He nodded gently. "No excuses, Your Honor. I was just cold." "Why that particular place?" she asked. "The cook Jimmy here sometimes helps me out. I've known his family a long time. His father and I served together." "Your military service?" she asked, though she already suspected. He recited it without hesitation. "Marine Corps, 1975 through 95, Staff Sergeant, 2nd Battalion, 8th Marines, Iraq." A faint flicker of something crossed her face as she noted that. But before she could say more, the courtroom doors opened again with a low groan. A sharply dressed man entered, heading straight to the defense table. "Your Honor," he began, setting down his briefcase. "Alexander Rossi. I'll be representing Mr. Quinn. Apologies for the delay, just retained." Mason turned to him, baffled. "I didn't hire anyone," he whispered. "You didn't have to," Rossi replied gently. "This one's on us. No charge." Judge Parker eyed the new arrival. "This is highly irregular," she said. "It was a last-minute arrangement," Rossi replied. "I'd like a few minutes to confer with my client, if the court allows." She studied both men for a moment, then nodded. 15-minute recess. As the judge stepped away, Mason leaned in. "Rossi and ... Parker." The lawyer gave a small nod. "Yes. Our firm." Meanwhile, Back in her chambers, Judge Parker removed her glasses and rubbed her temples. Her composure cracked, just slightly. She reached into her desk and drew out a faded photo, her younger self, beside her brother. Jack, in uniform. He'd been beaming on the day of his promotion. Tucked beneath the photo was an old letter. The paper, fragile from age, held the ink of her brother's last words from Iraq. He had written about a nightmarish ambush, one that nearly wiped out his entire unit, and one Manstaff Sergeant Mason Quinn who refused to leave him behind. If not for Quinn, Jack had written, he wouldn't have survived. Now, that same man stood in her courtroom branded a criminal for merely trying to survive the world he once fought to protect. Her throat tightened. A debt that could never be repaid now stared her straight in the face. Jack's final letter had spoken of a man who made survival possible for the rest of his unit. That man had braved a storm of gunfire, sprinting across exposed ground to reach a wounded Marine. After dragging the soldier to safety, he laid down covering fire so others could evacuate. 2 weeks after Jack wrote those words, he was killed by an IED. Olivia could still see the funeral in her mind, the silence, the salute, the folded flag pressed into her parents' trembling hands, and the Marine who approached her afterward, his expression solemn and eyes heavy with emotion. "Your son saved me," he said quietly. "I was the one he pulled out." He didn't have to give his name. She already knew it, Mason Quinn. After that day, Olivia had tried to contact him, hoping to learn more about her brother's final moments. But the military told her he'd been redeployed almost immediately. Years later, she found out he had been discharged with a traumatic brain injury and severe PTSD. The war had left deep scars, and now, 20 years later, that same man, grizzled, tired, and without a home, sat before her in court, shackled, silent, invisible to the world. A knock at her chamber door broke her thoughts. Alexander Rossi entered with a worried look. He had once practiced law alongside her late husband and remained one of the few people close to her. "Olivia, is everything okay?" he asked softly, using her name as only those closest to her still did. She turned the photo on her desk toward him. "It's him, Alex," she said quietly. "The Marine who carried Jack to safety that day." Rossi leaned closer, recognition dawning. "You mean the man in court today? He's that Mason Quinn? The one you've been searching for?" She gave a small nod. "Everything matches. Fallujah, 2004. Same battalion as Jack. He even received the Silver Star for that operation. Do you think he knows who you are?" She shook her head, doubtful. "I'm married after law school and go by Parker now. It's been a long time." There was a pause, thick with unspoken emotion. Then she added, "How does someone like him, a war hero, end up in this situation? Arrested for trying to keep warm." Rossi exhaled slowly. "He told me a little. PTSD left untreated. His file got lost in the VA shuffle. His wife left him during his last deployment. He tried to work construction, but the injuries caught up with him. One thing after another, until he had nothing left, just the streets." Olivia looked down at Jack's handwriting again. "Quinn is the best of us. If I can be even half the Marine he is, I'll have lived well." "What are you planning to do?" Rossi asked gently. "You could recuse yourself." "I'm not going anywhere," she replied firmly. "You know there are ethical lines here. There are moral ones too," she said, straightening her back. "And we've ignored people like him long enough." When she returned to the bench, her presence was composed and dignified. But a keen observer might have noticed the subtle tremor in her fingers as she organized the case file. "Mr. Rossi," she said with calm authority, "has your client reached a decision?" Rossi stepped forward. "Your Honor, we're moving to dismiss the charges. Mr. Quinn was taking shelter from dangerously cold weather. He had permission to be at the premises. He should not be punished for trying to survive." The prosecutor began to rise, but she signaled him to pause. "I'd like to speak to the defendant first," she said. Then she turned toward Mason Quinn. "According to your service records, you were deployed in Fallujah in 2004, is that correct?" Mason shifted in his seat. his back straightening as instinct took over. Yes, ma'am, 2nd Battalion, 8th Marines. Do you recall a mission on the city's outskirts, April 17th? He paused, frowning slightly as old memories resurfaced. Yes. We were escorting a convoy. Got ambushed outside the city. Were you involved in rescuing a wounded Marine that day? A Lieutenant Jack Parker? The courtroom fell silent. Mason's eyes narrowed in thought. Parker, ... he murmured. Yes. He got hit while helping one of the medics. I pulled him back behind cover. His voice dipped as he recalled the moment. He kept trying to get me to leave him. Said I needed to get the others out first. A man in the back of the courtroom leaned forward, visibly affected. Judge Parker continued. Do you know what happened to Lieutenant Parker after that? Mason looked down, his voice heavy. He was evacuated to Germany. I heard he went back to the field weeks later. His convoy was hit. I always wondered if it was worth it getting him out just for that to happen. Suddenly, the silver-haired man stood, his voice cracked with emotion. That's him. That's Staff Sergeant Quinn. I was there, he saved 6 of us that day. Gasps spread through the courtroom. Order. Olivia called, though her voice wavered slightly. The room stilled, the air thick with reverence and memory. Mason lowered his head, visibly uncomfortable under the attention. He hadn't come, seeking thanks or recognition. All he'd wanted was a place to escape the cold. But the truth had surfaced, so had the honor. And the debt. The Marine remained upright, posture firm. Your Honor, he said softly. The prosecutor moved forward, voice sharp. However admirable Mr. Quinn's service may be, it has no bearing on the charges at hand. You're mistaken, Judge Parker interrupted, tone unyielding. She brought the gavel down with emphasis. This court finds it highly relevant. We'll take a 10-minute recess. Bailiff, Mr. Quinn will stay put. As she rose from the bench, she did something unexpected. She paused, turned, and met the defendant's eyes. Mr. Quinn, when I return, there are matters far deeper than these charges we need to address. Inside her chambers, Judge Parker's carefully maintained calm began to crack. Her hand trembled as she brought it to her mouth, breath-catching. With memories that had long been buried, closing her eyes, she took a deep breath, then reached for the phone. This is Olivia Parker. Colonel Matthews. Yes, it's been years. I need your assistance right away. Exactly 10 minutes later, she re-entered the courtroom not alone. 3 Marines followed her in. A colonel, a master sergeant, and a young corporal carrying a polished wooden box. A hush fell over the room as heads turned. Despite the stiffness in his limbs, Mason Quinn instinctively came to attention. Judge Parker sat once more, removing her glasses, slowly, something she had never done in court before. When she spoke, it was not with the detachment of a judge, but with the gravity of someone personally connected to the moment. Before we continue, she said, voice composed but carrying emotion. There's something I must disclose. The Lieutenant Jack Parker mentioned earlier was my younger brother. A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Mason's expression shifted as recognition dawned. 2 decades ago, she went on, Jack wrote us a letter. He spoke of a staff sergeant who risked everything to reach him after he was wounded, who shielded others so they could get to safety. That man was you. A voice rang out from the audience. She's telling the truth, Your Honor, I was there. The gray-haired Marine stepped forward. Judge Parker gave a nod of acknowledgement. My brother died 2 weeks after that mission. At his funeral, Marines shared stories of his bravery, but they also told us about yours. Because of you, we had those last 2 weeks, with him 2 weeks, we never would have had otherwise. Her gaze landed back on Mason, firm and unwavering. After he died, I tried to find you. They said you returned to duty immediately. Later, they told me you'd been discharged, but they couldn't give me details. Still, I never stopped searching. Mason stood still, emotion flickering behind his tired eyes. And now, she said, voice thickening just slightly. Here you are, in front of me, after all these years. With a subtle signal, she motioned to the colonel. The officer stepped Forward, with practiced authority, Staff Sergeant Quinn, he began. For years, the cause has been trying to locate you. A recent audit of combat awards and declassified records led to a re-evaluation of your case. The corporal gently opened the case, revealing a prestigious medal hanging from a dark blue ribbon. By the authority of the Secretary of the Navy. The colonel said solemnly, and in recognition of extraordinary valor during operations, on April 17, 2004, Staff Sergeant Mason J. Quinn is hereby awarded the Navy Cross. A stunned silence fell, followed by audible gasps. The Navy Cross, the second highest decoration for valor. The colonel continued. Newly available intelligence confirms your actions didn't just save Lieutenant Parker and 5 others. You broke up an orchestrated enemy ambush that could have destroyed the entire convoy. Your Silver Star has been upgraded accordingly. Quinn, clearly shaken, finally found his voice. I'm no hero. I just did what I was trained to do. No mistake here, the colonel replied. You earned this. Long ago. From the gallery, a single voice called out, attention. The silver-haired Marine raised his hand in a sharp salute. One after another, others stood, some in uniform, others not, but every one of them held the unmistakable air of those who had once served. And in a moment, heavy with silent honor, the whole courtroom rose, each person standing to pay tribute to the man who had once vanished into war and now stood before them, Staff Sergeant Mason Quinn. The prosecutor rose, visibly torn caught between his duty to uphold the law and the undeniable weight of human decency. His face, once rigid with procedure, softened with sincere respect. Judge Parker, her voice trembling and her eyes shimmering with unshed tears, addressed the courtroom. In light of these exceptional circumstances, she began, struggling to maintain composure. All charges against Staff Sergeant Mason Quinn are dismissed with prejudice. She brought the gavel down with finality. Court is adjourned. As people began filing out of the courtroom, a master sergeant approached Mason, holding a government-issued tablet. Sir, he said, we've been trying to get in touch. Your VA disability status has been revised. You're now rated at 100%, retroactive to your discharge date. Mason looked at him, still trying to process everything. What does that mean? It means you're owed substantial back pay. The sergeant replied. You're entitled to complete medical coverage, housing support, and educational opportunities if you choose to use them. Alexander Rossi, the attorney who had championed Mason's case, stepped in with a reassuring tone. We'll take care of the paperwork. You won't have to fight the system anymore. From the back of the courtroom, a man slowly stepped forward. Jemmy, the cook who had quietly ensured Mason never went hungry. His voice quivered as he spoke. My dad once told me about a Marine who saved his whole unit. He said, if you ever meet Mason Quinn, you do right by him. Jimmy looked stunned as he extended a hand. I had no idea that man was you. Even the prosecutor moved closer now, remorse etched across his features. Sergeant, I didn't know your story. I'm sorry for the way this was handled. Surrounded by people who finally understood his worth, Mason's posture shifted. His back straightened. The tension in his shoulders eased like something long buried had begun to let go. Then, stepping down from the bench not as a judge, but as someone deeply affected, Olivia Parker approached him. Her voice was softer, now, carried by memory and gratitude. My brother told us what you said when you carried him out of that hell, she said. No Marine gets left behind. Not while I'm still breathing. Her eyes didn't waver. Today, we're holding true to that same promise for you. 2 weeks later, Mason stood before a mirror in an apartment he could barely believe was his. The Veterans Housing Program had placed him there, clean, quiet unit reserved for former homeless service members. The furnishings were simple, but the meaning behind them was not. On one wall hung a single frame, his Navy Cross, recently awarded, flanked by 2 Purple Hearts, and other medals recovered by Rossi from an old storage unit that had nearly been lost forever. A soft knock broke the silence. At the door stood Olivia Parker. No longer dressed in judicial robes, she carried a small box in her hands. May I come in, Sergeant Quinn? Mason stepped aside. It's just Mason now. She smiled. Then, just Olivia. They sat together in the modest room. The air between them felt thick, not awkward, but full of something unspoken. A shared understanding. I thought you should have these, Olivia said, opening the box to reveal a stack of worn envelopes. These were Jack's. He wrote to us every week. This one. She handed it to him. He wrote it the day after you saved his life. Mason took the letter carefully. His fingers trembled slightly. He didn't open it right away, he just held it close, humbled and quiet, finally acknowledged for the man he was. Mason unfolded the letter, his hands slightly unsteady as he took in the familiar, precise handwriting of Lieutenant Parker, the same script he'd seen so often in those mission briefings. He began reading aloud, his tone controlled at first. Mum and Dad, please don't be scared by the news. I'm okay thanks to one of our non-commissioned officers. Staff Sergeant Quinn did something yesterday that I still can't quite believe. When we came under attack, he ran through gunfire that should have taken him down. I ordered him to leave me behind, but he wouldn't. He said, not on my watch. No Marine gets left behind. Mason's voice faltered as emotion swelled. He talked about you a lot, Olivia said quietly, seated nearby. He admired you. Said you were the kind of Marine he aspired to be. Mason nodded slowly, eyes distant. He was a damn good officer. Young, yeah, but he cared about his team. That counts. After we lost Jack, I went to law school, Olivia said, motioning to the modest room around them. Everything you see, the court program, the housing support, it all began with his words. In that final letter, he talked about you. He wanted to make sure people like you weren't overlooked anymore. Mason looked down, uncomfortable under the weight of admiration. I'm not a hero. I just did what I had to do. That's usually what the real ones say, she replied, her voice steady. Then, after a pause, she added, there's something else. Jack volunteered for that last mission. They were going after the ones hurting innocent families. In his last letter, he said he was trying to live up to your example. The words hit Mason like a round to the chest. For 20 years, he'd worn guilt like armor, always questioning whether saving that officer had meant anything at all. He didn't die because of you, Olivia continued, sensing his inner turmoil. He lived the way he did because of you. He made that choice, knowing the risks. The silence that followed wasn't heavy, it was sacred. Two lives shaped by the same grief, bound together by respect and shared memory. Outside, the snow began to fall, dusting the streets in a soft, dignified hush. After a long moment, Mason spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. All those years I was out there. I thought I'd been erased. Like none of it meant anything. It mattered, Olivia replied without pause. To Jack, to the men you stood beside, and to me. Before she left, she gently placed a hand on his shoulder. Jack used to say, a Marine shows his worth, not when everyone's looking, but in the quiet moments, when no one sees. You lived that, Mason. Even when no one was watching. For the first time in what felt like ages, Mason stood upright, from duty or defiance, but from quiet strength. His shoulders squared, not from pain, but from pride. Someone remembered me, he said softly, almost to himself. In that instant, something long buried inside him shifted, something tender. Real. It wasn't just his story anymore. It was for everyone who'd ever acted with courage in silence. For those whose names were almost forgotten, some spend their lives pulling others from danger, all while silently wishing someone would pull them from invisibility. True honor doesn't need applause. It only needs to be seen. And sometimes, that's all it takes for a person to begin again. If you believe every life matters, that no one should be invisible, share your respect, stand for compassion, dignity, and justice. And follow Tally Strength for more stories that speak to the soul.